Welcome to today's webinar where you will learn how to perform takeoffs faster with Bluebeam Revu. In the AC industry, bids are required to win jobs. Lots of time is spent preparing them and many of them are rejected. How many more jobs could you win if you had a faster and more accurate way to get bids out the door? Join us in this webinar to learn how you can prepare your next bid as much as 70% faster using Bluebeam Revu. And Meredith Jung will be in charge of showing it to you. Meredith is a technical manager at Bluebeam, where she advises a variety of companies and organizations on best practices for streamlining their workflow with Revu. So she's the best person for the job. Coming up next week, we have a webinar. Okay, first of all, this is the web page where we display the Bluebeam products. So if you come to Novedge.com, look for it. We have all the lines of product, Revu Extreme, CAD, Standard, and all the different and possible solutions. And to find out more about our weekly special promotions, new releases, you can find us on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter. Coming up next week, why upgrade to Vectorworks Spotlight 2018? Last but not least, this webinar is free and is being recorded, so you can find it again later today or tomorrow on our YouTube and Vimeo channels. And now, Meredith, the stage is all yours. I'll see you back later.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Barbara. And thank you so much to everyone who has shown up today. It's great to have you with us. Today, I am going to show you how to perform your takeoffs faster with Bluebeam Revu, specifically version 2017. So if you guys are on version 2015 or 2016, I'll tell you when I'm using a feature that is unique to 2017. That way you don't go searching for it in the software and realize that you don't have it. If you do need to upgrade, do feel free to contact the folks at Novedge. They'll be happy to help you out with that. Now, a little more background on myself before we get started, because I think that it's relevant to what we're doing today. As Barbara showed on her slide, I actually used to work as an audiovisual contractor. And one of the things that I was doing is I was specifying and quoting systems for installation. As you can probably imagine, or as many of you likely are doing today or remember, right? We all did this on paper. We used our rulers and pens, and we took all of our measurements, we ordered the right materials, we put in a good bit of slop because you never knew just how accurate that scale on the page was, and you wanted to make sure that you didn't run out of materials or that you didn't underbid the job. And today we're going to show you how you can do that faster and actually more accurately than what we were doing in paper. I know before I came to Bluebeam, I just thought paper and pen was the way we all did things. And now that I know better, hopefully I can give you some tips based on my experience that will help you perform your takeoffs faster and get more bids out the door so you can win more business. Now, a quick bit of background on our company. Bluebeam is your global project partner. We've been developing innovative technology solutions that set the standard for collaboration and workflow efficiency for AEC professionals worldwide for over 15 years now. We're used by a number of the top companies in the country, and the reason that we're used by so many people is because of our approach. Here at Bluebeam, we really believe that it's all about our partnerships with customers and with the industry, to really create tools that are built tailor-made for the work you do day to day. We don't want to change the way you work. We want to help you do what you do better. And we do that by talking with contractors and architects and engineers and asking them, hey, so when you're performing takeoffs, what is it that you're looking to do? What are the tools that you need? All of the features that you see today in the software are going to be based on suggestions from people like you. And if you go through today and you go, man, wouldn't it be cool if Revu could do, and you think of something, go ahead and send those to suggestions@bluebeam.com. I'll bring it up probably again in the Q&A because we'll likely get some more questions about it. But go ahead, let our team know, because we do build everything in the software based on our partnerships with customers like you. Now, what you see today is going to be based on the PDF standard. This is a universal file format that's quickly becoming the universal file format. for a lot of us here in the industry. And the reason that Bluebeam uses PDF is because it's really not just a common file format, but it's something that can be a lot smarter than just a piece of paper. Now, there's a lot of PDF software out there that does create relatively dumb PDFs, but the PDFs that you see us work with today that have been created by Bluebeam products are incredibly intelligent PDFs that allow us to do a lot and store a lot of information. They're really more containers than pieces of paper. What you'll also see, though, is that everything that we do today, we're going to have results that can be sent to owners, sent to other project collaborators, and they'll all be able to view the information that we've got, because all of that information is ultimately being stored in that PDF, and that PDF is a universal file format. So what is it that we'll be covering today? Well, we're going to be covering takeoffs and estimates throughout a variety of specialty trades. I may not touch on specifically your trade, but trust me when I say that the tools we cover today allow you to do takeoffs for all of these specialty trades, along with just the general work that contractors do, performing takeoffs, or engineers or architects. We'll start by getting you set up for success. So I'm going to give you the tips and the tools that you need to set yourself up for a good takeoff. Once you're set up, we'll look at the measurement tools that will allow you to effectively perform those takeoffs and to get all of the measurements you need to create your bids. We will then customize and share tool sets. So we will look at how you can take those tools, make them look exactly the way that you need them to, include the data you need them to, and then share them so that everybody on your project is working with those same sets of tools. We'll then look at how we can do more with your takeoffs. So how do we use this data in a more useful way, whether that's downstream once we get into construction or during the actual takeoff process and the estimate and bidding process. And then we'll look at how you can easily connect your data with Excel so that for your existing bid sheets, you can actually be working in Excel and doing your takeoffs in Revu. So we'll look at a lot of great features for that. Especially since if you're anything like me, almost all of your bids are done in Excel. In terms of best practices, we're going to look at 3 sets of best practices today. And we want to group it this way so that it makes it easier to think through what we're covering, because there were 5 topics, but 3 is a much easier number, in my opinion, to remember. The first are going to be our best practices related to setup, so the interface, calibrating our documents, creating our custom columns, and applying layers to our documents. We'll then look at takeoffs. So we're going to look at all of the measurement tools, best practices for using those, best practices for creating tool sets, and a number of different tips and tricks that will make it easier for you to perform your takeoffs. And then finally, we'll look at the best practices for creating estimates, both within Revu using the markups list, and outside of Revu in Excel using a feature that's new for Revu 2017 called Quantity Link. So let's get into Revu. The slides are boring. Revu is what you're here to see. You want to know how to perform your takeoffs faster. And the first step to performing your takeoffs faster is making sure you are set up for success. Right off the bat, setting yourself up for success is making sure that the interface is optimized for the work that you're doing. Now, when you're performing takeoffs, you don't want a clouded space, right? You don't want everything and its brother open here, right? And this little teeny tiny, if I open my material takeoff here, this little teeny tiny material takeoff, right? We want as much screen real estate as possible. So if you've got any of these side panels open, go ahead, give them a quick close, and then make sure that the tools that you're going to be using are easily accessible for you. The measurement menu up here up top includes a lot of those tools there with an easy click. You could also have them turned on here in the toolbar, and you could actually go ahead if you wanted to and right click and actually hide what's going on up here. So sorry, it's not a right click. It is up here, this little white triangle here, to go ahead and hide the rest of the tools up there. So depending on how you want to do this, you can go ahead and hide the tools up there, show them in a toolbar on the side, or you can go ahead and let them show up there. I like to access them up here. I think it's easier for me, but everyone's got their own preferences, so I always like to show that off. By the way, if any of the tools that you use regularly don't show up in a toolbar and you want to make them show up, there's 2 ways to do that. One is to right-click and actually turn on the toolbar, so maybe that your toolbar is not turned on. For example, if you needed to have some shape tools or some sketch tools, you could turn those on just like that. There's our sketch tools across the top. We can move them around too, so just grab the 4 dots and give them a quick drag where you need them or turn them back off. The other thing that you can do is if there is a tool that doesn't show up in one of these existing toolbars, you can actually find that tool and you can just drop it down here. So for example, one of the things that we could do is we could come into edit, and we can take one of the tools here. Actually, let's go into markup. Maybe you want to be able to drop down a cloud pretty easily and you don't see it over on the right hand side there. You can take that pin tool and you can drop it in to your measurement toolbar. So there we go. There's that measurement toolbar, and now it's got the cloud showing. So very easy to add that in, make it easy to find there if you needed another tool. Now, what you're seeing in terms of the layout here, where I've got my menus across the top, I've got my toolbars on the side, with the exception of the cloud that I added, this is actually a default profile. And profiles, which you'll find under View, or down here in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see me use this a couple times today. Profiles are ways of customizing the interface and saving it for future use. You'll notice that I've got a variety of built-in profiles. The only one here that's not built in is advanced materials. It's the one I'm going to use today because it's the one my team put together for me for this project. But what profiles do is they store tools, they store toolbar configurations, everything about the interface so that we can easily have the tools that we need. When I'm performing a design review, you'll notice that I'm using a different set of tools, so it shows a different set of tools for me. Coming back to takeoffs, right, we've got all those measurement tools. As I mentioned, we can save these and we can actually export them. So if you had customized your takeoff profile, you wanted everybody else on the team who was going to be working on this bid, or maybe you wanted subcontractors working with the same tools as you do, you could export this out. Or maybe it's just a colleague who needs a little help getting started, right? A quick export, and then all they have to do is double click it and it pops right up in their instance of review. That's actually what I did here. So you'll notice I've got a tool set for advanced materials here. My team put this together. They included it here. It's actually just from markup, attachment. They went ahead and they chose, and I'm just going to come into my demo documents and choose from my custom tools. I've got an MEP profile. I'm just going to drop it here. So they placed it on there. They came into the preferences here on the right. They used the file icon, and then all they did was they clicked this show file name so that you would know what profile it was, and they were done. Really easy to get that set up. And now, watch as I change it to advanced materials. You'll notice in advanced materials, I have a different set of tools showing, different tools across the top and the right that my team thinks I'm going to need for the takeoff that I'm doing. And we'll talk about this in a moment, but we've got some columns set up here, and I've got some advanced materials actually set up in what's called our tool chest. And we'll look at these in just a second. We'll use these throughout today, but these are actually measurement tools that have been customized and put together just for this project for us. So profiles, that's my first best practice. Set up your interface, get your tools where you want them to be. Once your tools are where you want them to be for your takeoff, the next thing to do is to go ahead and calibrate your document. And you'll do this for every document, but once you do it for a document, you'll save it. So what you want to do when you calibrate, you want to take your longest measurement on your page for your calibration, and then you can either come into this measurements tab, which by the way, if you don't see it on the right, come up here to tab access, and go ahead and click measurements, and it'll pop it open wherever it is in the interface for you. Come into measurements, or again, you can also come into measure across the top with this measure tool. Come down to where it says calibrate and pick 2 points. So I'm going to pick my 2 points here. This is 23 feet, 10.5 inches. Okay, so 23 feet, 10.5 inches. So there is now my scale. I'm going to store this in the page so that it's saved with the document. So if I click save right now, that scale is now saved inside of this document, so they don't have to reset it when I come back to the document to perform more takeoffs later. Now, I want to check to make sure this is accurate. So I'm going to take this long measurement here. And before I do that, I know that this document has a precision of 1. I want that precision down actually to an 1/8 inch, because that's how precise I want it to be for the takeoffs I'm doing. Let's now go ahead and take our length. So I'm going to select my length tool, which again, I've got it here, I've got it up here, I've got it on the side. And actually, as I hover over it up here, you'll notice that there's a keyboard shortcut. So however you like to do it, you can select your tools. I'm going to go ahead and take that measurement. Looks like I ended up with a 5/8, just based on the way that this is designed. Let's do that 1/2 inch, and we got a perfect 1/2 inch here. So here we go, 23 feet, 1/2 inch. We know that this is calibrated properly for the document. I can then measure my way across all of these, and we've got accurate measurements here. So real easy to now take accurate measurements on this document. Another thing that I'm going to want to do before I actually get started with my takeoffs is make sure that down in the markups list, which we're going to be using a lot in the estimate section, I've got all my columns set up for what I want to do. So with Revu, what ends up happening is there are a variety of built-in columns that you can turn on and off and move around the interface. So for example, I can turn on the length column and the area column, wall area, and volume, so that for every measurement that I take on this document, I can see all of those. Now you'll notice for length, I just get the length and the wall area, but as we start doing volume or area measurements, you'll start to see all of these fill in. Revu's tracking all of this for us, along with the initial measurement. And I'm going to move that measurement over. So I'm going to take that so that actually it comes right after the date. And maybe I'm also going to turn off the color, right? These are the things that I want to see down here in this profile. Once again, this is something that gets saved to that profile. So once I've got this set up, if I were to save this and export this profile, all of my teammates would see this organization of all of our columns. The other thing that they're going to see down here is any custom columns I've created. So these are material costs. My team created these in advance. You'll notice blue gear wheel down here by columns. That gets you into your custom columns. And I have a choice for materials, and I've got a formula for the material cost. Now this formula was just done by typing in an expression. So we picked the measurement, we multiplied it by the material. We can multiply this if this is a markup, maybe like 1.2, right? Get our 20% markup to make sure that we're covering our costs. We can choose our currencies, the symbols that we use for them. And once that's all put together, we click OK, and we've got our formula. Now, the material choice, this is the one that's more important to set up in advance. The material cost you may not use, especially if you do your bids in Excel. The material cost, that formula won't make as much sense for you. But with these materials for the choice, this is actually stuff that we're going to apply to our tools and save with our tools so that we can have tools that are customized for the material that's being used for that section of work. You'll notice what we have here is we have items with subjects and numbers. The numbers are actually the costs per unit for these items. So for example, outlets, because we're going to count outlets as single units, that's a higher number, or furniture. Those are higher numbers than, say, our flooring, right? Because our tile flooring is going to cost less because the units is per square foot, right? Now, the subjects here, we're going to keep these subjects in mind because the subjects need to match the work that we do when we customize our measurements. So whatever we choose to set these subjects as originally, they're going to affect whether these items show up for us as an option to choose for those items. So we'll want to match our subjects. So for today, any area measurements we do are likely going to be flooring. Any of the measurements that we do related to maybe counting symbols within bathrooms, we'll want to make sure we label those plumbing. And that way we can choose these as options for the materials related to them. So we'll make sure we keep those broad. And of course, we can add these choices in two ways. We can create a CSV file and import it. So if I had one, I could import it. All we would need is the item, the subject, and the number, and pop that right in. We can also just manually add a new one by typing in the item, the subject, and assigning that numeric value. So we've got a lot of options here for how we get this in, but once it's set up, both our material and any formulas that we have, even if they're formulas for, calculating strange curved areas and things like that. I don't know if you noticed, but we had the ability to do like tangents and cosines and use pi. So we can do some pretty fancy math in here. But everything that we do here, we can either take these and export them to put them onto every document that we use so we never have to recreate it, or we can save it to the profile. Now, saving to the profile does not overwrite custom columns that are already in a document, but every time you open a brand new document that doesn't have custom columns in it, it'll apply these custom columns when it's saved to the profile. So I'm going to make sure that these are saved to the profile as a template for the current file and all new PDF documents without custom columns. That way, we've always got these columns coming in. And just in case, I would probably export them in case the document already has custom columns, so I could import them onto new documents like that. Our final piece of setup that we are going to do today is related to layers. And I'm not going to do too much of it, but if you know that you're going to be taking lots of different measurements and you want to be able to group them so that you can turn them on and off and make it easier to see the document, you would do that here with layers. You could import some layers that have been pre-created or take them from another document. Here, though, I'm just going to add some new layers for this document because I don't have any other documents with the layers I want on them yet. So I'm going to do a layer for the flooring. That'll be all of our area measurements today. I'm going to do a layer for base, because I know that we're going to be doing some base work here. And then I'm also going to add a new layer for our crown molding, because we'll be doing that today. We can then assign these to tools, and those tools will always come out with that same layer. So just a couple of tips for going through and making sure that your documents are set up for success before you get started performing your takeoff. Once your page is calibrated, you've got all of your molding taken care of, or layers taken care of with the molding and stuff like that. You've got your custom columns. You've saved your document with all of this information on it. That way you're good to go. Now it's time to actually start performing takeoffs, right? And there are a lot of tools, as you've probably noticed, for performing takeoffs here in Revu. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at some of the takeoffs that we can perform today, okay? So right off the bat, most of the takeoffs that we perform on a day-to-day basis, all covered with Revu. You saw the length tool earlier. We've also got the ability to do perimeters, so we can, go ahead and take the perimeter of the elevator room here. We could also take the area of that room. Notice that for any of these square rooms, we can just click and drag. But next to it, I've got this EMR room. The EMR room's got a bit of a funny shape. Well, no worries. We can actually take points. So whether that's our perimeter or our area, we're just going to take the points. And notice, I'm going to zoom in here. Revu is actually coming in and really sticking to that line, coming to the center points of it, giving us as accurate a measurement as it possibly can in terms of our perimeter here. Just going to double click here to close out the perimeter. We don't want to include that doorway there. And I can make this even more accurate by turning this content function on down here. So just a cool trick, if you're having trouble getting it to snap to these lines, check the content to make sure you gain the best snap possible. The other thing to keep in mind is that this PDF was created by Bluebeam, and it's created using vector PDF content. And that vector PDF content is smarter because it actually has coordinates on the page, which makes it much easier to get more accurate results, whether we're doing perimeters or also if we're, clicking to take the area here. Gives us much more accurate results. So as much as possible, we'll want to be going through and making sure that we've got vector PDFs to work with and that we're taking our measurements like this. Okay, so we've got some pretty accurate measurements going on. with our measurements, one of the tricks that we can use when we're doing perimeters, areas, volumes, is we can shift click and we can move our measurements around so they're easier to see. We've also got some customization that we can do to these markups. So with these measurements that we're taking, we can come in, and I'm just going to pop up in the right panel again with this knob into measurements. And one of the things that we can do, and actually I want to start with the properties for us today. One of the things that we can do is we can actually show some segment values. So whether we're working on an area or we're working with our perimeter, right, we can show all of the individual segments on our perimeter and have those measurements all show up, and then shift click and move them all to places that we want. And we can also choose to align them all horizontally so that, for example, this 8 foot 2 inches here shows up really easily. The other thing we can do is we can choose what shows up as our caption. Now, right now, what we've got is we've got this perimeter measurement. We've got our length here. We can also show our depth or wall area since we have those as options for this. If I chose our area measurement, you notice that we also have widths and heights and volume that we can show up on here. So if we also wanted to know the volume of the room, we could have both of those show up. The other thing that we can have show up is this label. And this label is great because the label allows us to really customize some of the information that's being stored with this measurement. So this is 78.2 square feet, but 78.2 square feet of what? Well, let's say that, first of all, the subject for this is flooring. We're taking areas, so these are going to be flooring. And then let's say that this is actually tile flooring. So we can specify that here. And now by showing this caption, watch, I'm going to click away from the tile field there. And look, we now have that this is 78.2 square feet of tile already assigned to that measurement. Now, in addition to some of that data, we've also got the ability to take some of our more basic appearances and change them. So we can go, for example, make this purple and put a nice fill color and a lighter purple there, maybe highlight it so we see all of the content behind it, and change the text color so that it looks better on top. So we've got a nice dark purple there. For those of you who like to, for example, do all of your flooring in the same color but want to still be able to differentiate between types of flooring, you could use hatch patterns, for example. You can create your own, or just go ahead and, for example, do a weave here. So we could do a purple weave. Makes it a little harder to see our text, but we could then change our opacity here to make it easier to see the text in the background. There we go. So now it's much easier to read our text. And we could do this for pretty much all of the measurements that we take. So all the measurements you see today that we use throughout today, we can go ahead and customize in this way. We can show center points for rooms. The other thing that we can do here, in addition to customizing some of these visible properties, is to do additional customization of some of the less visible properties. And one of those is to take our custom columns. Remember how we made that custom material column with the choices? And we can actually apply one of those here. So this will be our first tile, tile 1 for this room. You'll notice it automatically calculated our cost because we have that formula set up. But I'll even update this label to say tile 1 so that it shows exactly what we're using and it looks exactly the way we want it to. So you've got a lot of customizability, which makes it easier to tell apart the different measurements that you have on your page. As you start to build out these documents, having these customized is going to make a huge difference. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you how you can reuse these markups once they're customized. Okay? So we talked about measuring our rooms, right? Some of our more basic finish measurements or concrete measurements, construction measurements, right? We've also got some more advanced measurements that are available within Revu, which would be things that you might have done a little more standardly. One of the first ones actually comes with this area measurement. So I'm going to select the area measurement in the elevator room. And I want you to note, as I change to the measurements, We've got both the ability to set the depth, which by default is 8 feet for this room, but we could set that to 10 feet. All of the measurements that are area measurements have the ability to change depth so you can get the volume. Same with the volume measurements. And actually our perimeters. Our perimeter has a depth field as well. That way, we can get the proper wall area for that. The other thing that we've got going for us with this area measurement is the ability to set a slope. So for example, if we were doing a roof, we might have a pitch of, and let me drag this out so you can see what it's over, but we might have a pitch of 3/12 for the roof. Notice, I'm going to change this and click away. Notice that we now have an updated area. So area 64.7 square feet, slope 3/12 pitch. If I turn that back to 0/12, notice it goes back to 62.8 square feet. So Revu will do those calculations for us. It'll do grades, it'll do degrees, has a lot of advanced functionality there. One of the more advanced features that I really like coming from audio is this feature called polylinks. And I'm going to show it off by moving into our restroom over here because it's got a great use case for electrical and AV work, but also for piping and plumbing work. And what polylink does is it allows you to take the same measurement between multiple nodes and get both the total length and the length between the nodes. So here we go. I have taken, and by the way, I've been hitting that shift key to make sure that my measurements come out straight, but hold that shift key and move this down and move these out too so that we can see each of these individual lengths more nicely. Here we go. These are the lengths between each of the sinks. So I've got the total length of piping that I need along with the length for each pipe run that's there. Now in audio, I would have used this a lot because I often had to string multiple speakers together. So I'd have to figure out what the total amount of cable was that I needed and then how much cable I needed to go between the different speakers. So I'd have those individuals, I'd have the total. It's all put together for me with just one measurement here. One of the other cool things with polylinks or perimeter tools is the ability here, and you'll notice it right down here, to add a rise or drop. If you guys are doing work on multi-story projects, this is fantastic because now you can say that between the first floor and the second floor, I need to have an additional 10 feet of piping to get us to the next floor. Once that rise drop is put in, notice, I'm going to shift click again to drag this, our length 30 feet, 1.5 inches, our rise drop 10 feet. So it updated that length to include that rise or drop. I can then set that back to 0 and we go back to having just our original length here. One of the last really cool things that we can do here, and this is a cool trick for once you've won the job, is you can come through here, right click, and actually go ahead and right click and split all of these measurements off. So now we've split these into individual lengths, and those individual lengths we can now go through and we can actually track them separately to see when they've been installed. So we've got a lot of flexibility here with how we want to use this polylinks tool. Highly recommended, one of my favorite new features in Revu 2017 this year. It's definitely a game changer when it comes to a lot of these types of runs that we do. Another piece of advanced takeoff functionality that's really helpful for those of us who are installing things is the ability to count. And Revu has the ability to use a count tool pretty standard, so just give a quick count. Or to actually search for things within a document and count all of the things that show up in that document. Now I've got a 3-page document here, and let's say that I wanted to count all of the toilets in the document. Coming over to the search functionality, I'm just going to take a rectangle of one of these toilets, get a nice little snapshot of it, and then I'm going to ask Revu to search the entire document. I could do a folder of documents or just this page. I'm going to just search the entire document. And what it's going to do is it's going to look for that toilet. It's going to look for that toilet facing this way and on 45-degree angle. So it's going to go all around to find rotations of the toilet. and it's going to pop out all of the toilets that exist within this document, all 3 pages of the document, not just the first one. You'll notice that it's taking a second just to give us all 14 of the toilets in this document from all of the different pages that we have here. If I think that those are all toilets, that they're all accurate, I can check them all, and then I can actually apply a count measurement to them. And I can either apply the built-in count measurements, so one of the built-in symbols, like that check mark, or what I can do, and we'll talk again about tool sets in just a second, I can take one of my pre-made tools, and I can apply that pre-made tool. So for example, if this is our symbol for a toilet, I can apply that right away. Very quick and easy to apply that toilet symbol right to the toilets. And you'll notice it caught all of them. It's got a couple that are upside down here. Took care of all of that very quickly for us. As I zoom out, there are no other restrooms. There are no other toilets for it to have picked. It found them all. Now, finally, and this is a really big one, and one that I wish I'd had ages ago. Final tool I want to show you today is a new tool for Review 2017. So I got 2, but I'm going to show you this one first because this one really is a game changer for those of us who are taking measurements of really complex areas. And this is a tool called Dynamic Fill. Before I show you Dynamic Fill, first a trick for those of you not on Review 2017, if you haven't done it before, if you've got a sloped area, go ahead, take your curve section, give it a straight line, then take your straight line back down to the bottom, and then do that again at the moment you start to slope, right? Take your slopes and then take a right click on the line. So on the line, convert that line to an arc, and then use these yellow control points to go through and really take that arc and make it perfectly fit where you have your line set, okay? So you can get really accurate measurements this way. It takes a while, though, if you've got lots of curve spaces. So I would like to introduce you to a new feature in Review 2017 called Dynamic Fill. Dynamic Fill is great because what Dynamic Fill does is it allows you to essentially paint in an area. So right here for this ramp, I'm just going to take my paint bucket and fill it in. I know that I've got clean boundaries on this document, so I don't have to worry about accidentally going outside of the lines because the lines are clearly defined here, okay? I have filled in this section. At this point now, I can apply any measurement markup I want. So I can take, for example, the area, either using our default measurement, that tile 1 I just created, or any of my existing measurements. So like, I'm going to choose this concrete for the ramp. I can also take a poly length measurement. I can apply a perimeter to this if I want. I can apply a volume. I can put a polygon markup on it, or I can create a space. And spaces is a way of tracking information on your documents. I'm not going to dig into it today, but it's an option for those of you who want to be able to track your measurements to specific areas within the document. Right now, though, I'm going to go ahead. I'll apply a perimeter. I don't need one here, but I'll pretend that we have a tile base here. I will apply that, and what you'll notice now is that I have 2 markups here. I have my concrete, which is our area, and let me go ahead and just turn on the caption there so you can see that. And then I've also got our perimeter, and turn on the caption there so you can see it too. And the perimeter caption, I assume, is chilling up top here. Pull that out, maybe give it a quick little rotation so it's easier to read, and a little too far, but there we go. Tile base, concrete fill. It did that in seconds. It also works great on places where we don't have closed lines. So here's this electrical room. It would be a pain to have to measure that out. I can go ahead. I'm just going to quickly change my boundary size real quick because I like a smaller boundary than the defaults. I'm going to click this Add Boundary button. And I'm just going to take a boundary. So I'm going to go across the doorway here. I'm holding that Shift key to make sure that my line is straight. Shift key will make any line that you draw in Review straight. And then I'm just going to paint in the electrical room. So once again, paint that in, drop over the door. And this room we'll say is going to be concrete 1 instead of concrete 2. We'll give it a rubber base instead of that tile base. Click apply, and now we have the square footage of that room. And we've got our perimeter measurement, which I can show the caption on again, and you can see that rubber base caption. Okay. Very quick and easy. You want to save a lot of time on your takeoffs. This tool will save you a lot of time on your takeoffs. It's absolutely fantastic. I don't know what I did without it. If you're not on Review 2017 and you use any of these measurement tools on a regular basis, highly recommended. Please go ahead and get this. The last tool I wanted to show you today is this cutout tool. You can do polygon and ellipse cutouts, and those cutouts actually update the square footage of your space. So, you know, if the architect had some really cool feature that they wanted to put into the room, you can cut that out, regardless of what shape the architect put it in. Makes that really easy functionality. That ellipse, by the way, is new for Review 2017. For those of you guys who do skylights and roofs, highly recommend it, because you're going to get the slope with Review 2017, which will allow you to get the correct area on your sloped roof. And then you'll be able to cut out, and that cutout will also pay attention to the slope when you take the cutout there. And then you can go ahead and put in a new measurement. You can actually fill that in with an area measurement for the area of your skylight. So really cool tool functionality that will just make it a lot faster for you to take your takeoffs in the first place. Now, the final thing when we talk about best practices for measurements and takeoffs and making those takeoffs faster is, of course, to take your custom tools and save them. You notice I've been using custom tools quite a bit today, right? When I did dynamic fill, I applied my custom tools to that fill. When I did our count measurements, right, I used custom tools to take care of those counts. By the way, quick tip, right click, you can also split all your counts just like you did the poly length, so that down in construction, you can actually go through and track the status, for example, of each of these toilets, when it's arrived, when it's been installed, etc. Anyway, we're on takeoffs today. We're not in construction. So let's look at how we actually create and save these tools. Now, we created the tool earlier, right? We used our preferences, opening those back up again, the properties. By the way, right-click, best friend in the software. If you can't find something, go ahead and right-click. So we did the properties here, right, and we customized them all. And we included the subjects and the label and things like that. Once this has been customized, you can set it as your default, or you can come into what's known as the tool chest. I briefly mentioned it earlier. And what you'll notice is that, along with all the other tools we use today, is saved here in our recent tools. So if I click it in my recent tools, what you'll notice now is I can come into the vestibule and I can apply that same tile flooring to the vestibule. I can also take that tile flooring and I can drop it then into my recent tools. Now, one more note, I'm just going to delete that real quick before I drop it in my recent tools. Remember earlier we talked about setting up layers? Well, I can assign the layer to this too. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to layer, assign that flooring layer. I'm going to assign it to this one too. But now, watch as I put this down new. So I now have a flooring layer. As I hover over it, you'll see that layer flooring as part of it. As I put it down here, we'll have that layer. If I save it here, and I hover over it, so let's save it right under the other flooring. Hover over it, and you'll have that same layer. And when I come into layers and turn off flooring, you'll notice they disappear. I turn it back on, they pop right back up. So very easy for us to go through and create these tools. And my team created a whole set of tools for me. And the way that they got those tools to me was, again, through that profile. So when you go to export the profiles, by the way, you can export them from here, just like you did from the view section. When they went to export this profile, what they did is they checked this box, include dependencies. And that included all of the tools in that tool set so that I could take all of those tools and use them for my takeoffs. Now you'll notice I did not use them all for my takeoffs. I created my own. But in an ideal world, I would use all of the tools that my team created so that we're all using a standard set of tools. My apologies, just a second. By the way, while we're pausing for a second, if you had any questions that popped up, feel free to type them in the question window. We will do a live Q&A at the end of today's webinar, and that'll be part of the recording for those of you guys who do need to leave right at noon. Just another second. Okay, back up and running. So my team sent me these tools through the profile. They used to include dependencies here. But we could also go ahead and get these tools out to our team by exporting them directly. So I can click the little blue gear wheel here, give it a quick save, and then go ahead and export that out. And again, I email that out to anyone on the team. They double click it and they automatically have this set of tools. This is going to be a huge time saver. Have the tools set up already. Make sure that your tools, when you set them up just like we did, they have the label and that they have in them, so for example, if I choose the concrete here, that they have those custom material columns already assigned to them, because this is going to be a huge time saver for you down the line to not have to reassign materials every time that you place these measurements. Create a tool for each material you've got and use that tool every time you're placing the material on the page. All you have to do then, if you need to replace the material, you just replace the measurement with the new material measurement and you're updated and ready to go. And it makes it very easy to tell on the page when you've got concrete 1 down, when you've got tile 2, just giving it a click, or concrete 2, tile 1. Go ahead and make those customizations and make them stick. So we've talked at this point about the best practices for setting yourself up for success. We've talked about the best practices for actually performing our takeoffs and really streamlining the takeoffs we do. Let's look now at how we create our estimates. Here at the bottom of our view is the markups list. I showed it to you earlier when we created our custom columns, but this is where every single takeoff that we've done today is being tracked and stored. So every single one of them shows up here. Every measurement associated with them, length, area, wall area, volume, everything that can be taken from that measurement is being put here. And then we've got our measurement column, which is the measurement that we intended to take. When you set up your tools for the measurement you intend to take, because this is the one that's going to be easiest for us to tie to Excel. That being said, we could easily, again, use any of these measurements we've got, length, area, wall area, volume, and use those for calculating material costs, for performing advanced functionality in terms of doing other advanced formulas and functions. Now, with this information, we have quite a few capabilities. We can turn on a status column. We can set statuses that stack on top of each other. We probably don't want the default ones. You can customize those if you want here. But the status of any of these things, I'm going to turn that status column off. We won't use it today. As I mentioned, we can do formulas and do a lot of calculations in the software. We can change materials. Notice that with the subject of area measurement, I don't show any materials because none of my materials have that subject. But for the subject of base, that I can choose either between baseboard 1 or the rubber base. Okay, so that's where that subject comes into play there. We can see the date and time any of these are put in, and then we can come through and we can create summaries of the information that's down here. Now, if we've been doing all of our calculations down here, maybe we just want to print this to a PDF summary or print this to paper, and we've got that all to send out. Or maybe we're going to put this into XML so we can import it into our bid software or send it out to CSV so that we can finish it up in Excel. That being said, if you guys are working in Excel, the best practice and the fastest way to build your bids in Excel is a feature. It's in Revu Extreme 2017 only. So you will need Revu Extreme and you will need Revu 2017. But the feature there is called Quantity Link. And what Quantity Link does, and let me show this to you because it's really cool when you see it actually in action, is that it allows us to tie, here we go, the quantities that we have here in our bid sheet with the quantities that we have here in our markups list. So if let me just hide that page label too, so it's easier to see what's going on. If I come down to flooring, and actually I do want an actual label column turned on, and I'm going to move that label over so that you can see what all of these are labeled, because we were using those labels to better understand what's going on here. Okay, so here is the subject, here's the label, and then we'll move the measurement right next to it, so it's really easy to see. Tile 1, if I sort, instead by subject, let's sort by label. We look at tile 1, my total for tile 1 is 147.3. I don't have it set up yet, but I'm just going to give a quick right click. I'm going to create a link, total of, and actually that is, yep, square feet, so that's area of, and then I'm going to use my label, tile 1. Okay, and there we go, tile 1. I've got 147.3 square feet. Perfect match, right? If I were to add a new tile 1 on here, right, here's that tile 1 we did. I'm going to add this onto the page. Watch that updated in real time, 349.6, 349.6. It does this for all of the measurements we take. Setting it up is incredibly easy. All we do is we click into a cell, we right click, we choose our source file. So you're going to select your source file. Right now, my source file is our blank material takeoff. And then you go through, and just like I did a second ago, let me take a blank one here, right? You click create. You pick maybe your label, maybe it's your subject, maybe it's the material, right? You can pick any of those, choose that as your filter, and it'll pull in all of the measurements for that. And here's where this gets really cool, because this we can set up in advance. So let's say that we set up all of the fields here, and we are now doing a material takeoff on a different page. This is our template now. I'm going to close this document. Actually, I'll leave it open. But let me open up. I've got a material takeoff that I did previously, and it uses all of the tools from our tool set. So we know that the labels for all of these tools are just the way we want them to be, because I've gone ahead and preset all of those labels and preset all of the amounts here. At this point, all I have to do, and by the way, I am going to fix this label because I know that the label here should actually be, we won't use label tile 1, we'll use the material tile 1, okay? So I'm going ahead, I'm updating that. I'm going to choose a new source file. So I'm going to come into my source files. I'm going to remove this one, and I'm going to add in my file. By the way, you can have multiple files, so you can take all of the files you've done takeoffs on, and you can put them in here. I'm going to click OK, though, and I want you to watch. I now have everything updated here. So in terms of carpet 01, I should have 4,164 square feet, 4,164 square feet. It's gone ahead and taken all of the work, actually, that Eric did. I didn't do it. I'm lazy like that. Stealing credit for his work. But it takes all my counts, all my measurements that I have linked up. It's put it in here. And now all I have to do is come through and file, save as. I right click all the time because right click's how you fix everything in Revu. Come into my takeoffs, and I can say this is a 1.1.1 bid, right? And then I can still go back into my template, pull in a new page, and then do the bid off of that, right? So I can set up my template, I send it out to everybody, we all have the same bid template, it's all tied to our tools, it's all tied to the work we do. Huge time saver. When we talk about being able to save up to 70% on the takeoffs you do, this is how we're doing it, right? We're setting up our tools in advance, we're making sure that we've got everything ready to go with all the customizations we need to get our jobs done faster. So with that, I do want to thank you all so much for coming. A quick recap, right? We looked at setup, takeoff, and estimate creation. So looking at the measurement tools, the interface, the markup list, all of that work. And at this point, we'll skip over that one. I do want to thank you for coming. I'm going to turn this back up over to Barbara for just a second so that she can close out her slides, and then we're going to go into that live Q&A. So be sure to type your questions into the question window, and she will be more than happy. We will be more than happy to answer those live on air in just a second.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Meredith. Never again without review. So you guys really do think of everything. I want to remind you again that this webinar has been recorded. So if you missed something, if you want to rewatch it, you can go and find it on our YouTube and Vimeo channel. I want to thank you for attending today's webinar. And this is the product page on the Novedge website, novedge.com, and you can find all the review solutions that fit best your business. So check it out, and we're available to sell Bluebeam worldwide. So give us a call. You can also email directly calvin@novedge.com, CALVIN@novedge.com, and he'll set you up with the best product for your needs. Next week, we have a webinar on Vectorworks Spotlight 2018, and you can also find Novedge on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter. And let's see if we have any questions before we say goodbye.
We do. So if it's all right, Barbara, I'm going to take back over the screen and show the answers to these questions.
Yes.
Perfect. So let's get back into review. You guys have some fantastic questions here, and I thank you so much for adding all of these questions in. Our first question right at the top relates to calibration. And the question is, how do I get my units to go from decimals to feet and inches? So let me go ahead and come back to our original document we've been working with. And I'm going to come back into our measurements tab here. And what you're going to notice as I get into the measurements tab here is that here within the measurements tab, we've got both what our original measurement is and then what we want our units to be. So right now I have my units set to feet and inches, which is why I get feet and inches as my units. But if I set that just to feet and I were then to take a measurement, you'll notice that those measurements now come with decimal points rather than, as it did with feet and inches, with the ability to do portions of an inch. So just change this to feet and inches, and you'll be good to go there. Same thing if you're working in metric. Go ahead, change it to centimeters or millimeters or meters, whatever you're working in. You can quickly go ahead and change that. Great question. By the way, I didn't talk about it earlier, but if any of you guys are doing any civil work, you can actually do separate vertical scales, which is pretty cool. So that you can do a separate Y scale from your X scale. I know a lot of civil projects require that. Another great question here, in the quantity tool for counting lights, etc. So those quantity tools that you saw, the custom ones that I had over here for the plumbing and stuff, it's very easy to create those. So let me show you actually how you would create one, because I realized I didn't do that today. So to create a custom count tool, all you do is you place the count tool down. I'm going to hit escape and choose it again. And once you place that, you're going to come over into your properties and you're going to change the appearance. So we're going to call this lighting. And let's say that this is light receptacle 1. Let's say that light receptacle 1 is a square light receptacle. and that we want it to show up in yellow. So it's very easy to find right there. Lighting, oh, looks like I need to redo my label. It didn't get saved. But there we go. Light receptacle 1, lighting. Now you'll notice, for some reason it didn't show up in my recent tools, but that's okay. I'm just going to right click and add it to my tool chest, advanced material takeoffs. You've also got the ability under options to add it to your tool chest. And you'll notice now that here we go, here's my light receptacle 1, and now I can count light receptacles all day. So very easy to set up those counts like that. You can also set up counts based on snapshots. So if you've got an image of what the light receptacle looks like that you've taken on the document, here up in edit, so I'm going to snapshot. Let's pretend that this is our receptacle. Give that a quick paste. You'll notice now that it shows up here in recent tools. All I have to do is to drag it to a tool set, right click, and then come over here and say create count. So now I can count light receptacles like that. I know that's not the light receptacle on this particular image, but it gives you the option of quickly creating a count measurement like that. And then once again, you can customize that with the subject, the label, the material, all available for you. So great questions there. Another great question here, the PDF you're working on, is it just any PDF or does it have to be created by Bluebeam? So you can do these takeoffs on just any PDF. As long as the PDF follows the ISO standard, it'll open in Revu and you can do the takeoffs. So you don't have to worry too much about what the architect sends you. That being said, the PDFs that are created by certain programs, including Revu, do have smarter information in them. So with this particular PDF, what you'll notice, again, as I pick any of my measurement tools, and let's just pick one off the top here, is that it snaps to that content. That's snapping to the content. If this was what's known as a raster PDF, which some programs do create, I wouldn't get this snap. It wouldn't recognize these lines as being specific lines in the PDF. So it would make things a little harder. It does slow down your process a bit, but you can perform takeoffs on any PDF with Revu. In the measurements panel, does the perimeter quantity show up? I'm actually not entirely sure what you mean by perimeter quantity, but I can go ahead and show you what does show up when I put a perimeter. So I'm just going to do a short little perimeter here. So there's 19 feet 6 inches. And as I come into our measurements here, let me just move this across the screen so it's easy to see. So we've got the depth, the width, the height. These would be things that we could set for particular markups. Notice when I do volume, it'll show down here. The depth, it also shows what the width and the height are of that, but those are set things. But if I select this, it does show our perimeter, the current and the total here for the perimeter. So that does show up there. And of course, it also shows up here in the markups list. Okay. What version of Revu do you need to have for the dynamic link to Excel? That is Revu Extreme. And you can, if you're not on Revu Extreme version 2017, you can contact Novedge to get yourself upgraded to that. They'll be more than happy to help you there. Another great question here, what happens with a replacement or revision PDF in the markups? This is a fantastic one because guess what happens, right? You've done all these takeoffs and now there's a revision. So I'm going to go ahead, open back up our material takeoff, right? Because this is the one that we've got all of our comments on. And I'm going to go through, I'm pretty certain I have a good revision of this somewhere. So let me go and look at my revisions. Oh, wait, my revisions. Let's say revision 2. I don't want that one. First floor plan stuff. So this is revision 2. I assume there are some changes here. Just going to hope for the best on this revision. So let's say this is our revision. I need to get my material takeoff in there. I can do that here in the markups list. And all I have to do is I have to select the PDF. So I'm going to come to this import button here. Click import. I'm going to come into my takeoffs. I'm going to take my tutorial takeoff, and I'm going to import them there. Oh, I've only got one page instead of 3, so it's just going to import everything that's on the first page. But it now has everything that's on the first page on here. And now I can come through and I can notice where, for example, I'm missing things, or I have too many things because of the changes in the layout here. So I can come through and look at that. We could also, if I wanted to, I could compare the two of these. There's a comparison function up here. So document comparison, either compare documents, which will cloud all the changes, or overlay pages. Makes it very easy for me to see what's changed between the two revisions and update my takeoffs accordingly. Great question. Great question. Is it possible to measure in 3D? The full question is it possible to resize, move, and measure using the 3D model editor for review? So at this time, review only performs takeoffs on 2D documents. That being said, if you do have a 3D document, you do have a lot of functionality in the software. So let me just go ahead and close these up again. I'm going to open my 3D file here. So I've got a terminal building. And with Review 2017, here in our 3D file, first thing you'll notice is I've got the ability to navigate this file very easily. I can go ahead, even though my measurement tools are unavailable, and you'll notice I can't, for example, take a perimeter here. We do have the ability to mark it up, so if there's issues here, we can mark that up. Also, with the 3D model tree, and I'm going to open that up right now, and I'm actually going to drag that down here because I find it much easier to view down here. So if I look at my 3D model tree here, what you'll notice is that I've got a lot of information on all of our parts down here. So I can select the model part and see all of the metadata that was exported out of Revit or Navisworks or AutoCAD, or frankly, with the IFC file from ArchiCAD or Allplan. And I can really come through and I can actually turn on and off any information I want. So if, for example, there are measurements, for example, there's a depth that's associated with some of this, that I've just turned on, or I can do like the height. Oh, there's a couple of heights. I could actually go ahead, turn all that information on. You'll notice as I come to the end now, I've got some volume, area, the depth, the height. Not everybody has depth and height, but I can take all of this data and I can actually use this data in Excel by coming to summary and exporting this to a CSV file. So I can export all of this information, and I can actually take from the model all of the data that I need to go ahead and perform a variety of different little takeoffs here for stuff. So even though I can't measure the 3D PDF, I can get a lot of that measurement information that's being stored in the original design program out to Excel. Great questions. Here's another great question, and this one, for those of you who have ever been asked to send your original takeoff document to the owner, this is one you guys will know quite familiarly. What are the security features of Review? So if we have, opening back up our main takeoff here, right? If we've got a page full of takeoffs, what's the last thing that we want the owner to do? Don't want the owner to grab this document and make changes to our measurements, right? Well, within Review, there's a variety of security features. The one that you're going to use most likely is going to be this particular lock down here. It's also available under Document and Security, but I like to click the lock. And what you'll notice with that lock is we've got a variety of security features here. If I click Change Permissions, I can either make this document require a password to open, or I can enable permissions by password. So if I enter my password here, okay, at this point I can decide, can the owner print it? What changes can they make? So maybe I just want them to only be able to fill in form fields and add digital signatures if they need to be able to apply comments and sign off on a document. I can decide whether they can copy text or graphics, and I can decide whether they can extract content for accessibility. This is ADA related stuff. And then I can choose how I encrypt it. On a government project, you've got up to 256-bit encryption, so you can get full government level encryption on this. US government, I assume it's the same in a lot of other countries. We tend to be pretty strict on that stuff. If I click OK here, by the way, you can save, just a quick note, you can save the settings up where it says save settings up here, so you can apply the same settings to every document. But as I click OK, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as a document with security, because if I save it otherwise, I'm going to forget that there's security on it. What you'll notice is that I now have a lockdown here. And as I come in to markup, actually, I think I have to close and reopen it. So let me close it, reopen it. So you've sent this to the owner opens it. They'll see all of the markup tools are grayed out. They won't be able to mark it up. And all of your measurements, right? You saw how I changed that measurement earlier. Those control points have all changed to gray, so no one can change it. So definitely quite a bit of security there. Okay, looking at the questions and the chat here, I don't see any in the chat, and I don't see any new ones in the questions, but I will hang out for just another minute. So to ask the question, just type the question into the question window. It's a live Q&A because I'm answering the questions live on air, not because you're actually getting to ask your questions live on air. Sorry about that. It makes for a better recording if we take the questions from the question window and then go ahead and answer those live on air. So if you have a question, please type it in the question window. I'm going to hang out for just a few more moments to give everybody an opportunity to ask their questions. Great questions for the quantity link. Okay, and to doing duck takeoffs with width and height. Perfect. So let's look at quantity link first. So how do you do multiple layers in the same cell with quantity link? I'd love to know more about your use case here and how you're using quantity link, because at this time, quantity link is tied to a single filter. So you noticed in my quantity link, I used the filter of the label to pull out just the measurements that are related to the label. If I were doing something more complex, where, for example, I wanted to have all the total for all of my flooring or the total for all of my concrete, I would actually use Excel to go ahead and do those subtotals, and might as well jump in and show you a little of how I might do that myself. So coming in here to my demo document and into my takeoffs. Sorry, I've got this big question window all over this, and I'm moving my folder around to be able to see it. So here is our sample bid, right, that we set up. So if, for example, I wanted, looks like I have given it a little pain. I could locate the file, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, sure, I'll locate the file, but I don't, there we go. So updated file, right? If I wanted to know the total of the concrete, I would just add in a new total concrete, and then I would say sum C7 to C8. Requires a little more work on this end, but it's actually probably in the long term easier to have this set up, because that way if you ever wanted to break it out again, you still have the original broken out amounts. I know I always needed to include individual amounts along with the totals for our bids. So just something to consider there as you're doing that. But if you've got a good use case, I'd love to hear it. Please send it to suggestions, and let me write that up here for you so that you know where that is. Send the use case, why you would use it that way, and what you're looking for to suggestions@bluebeam.com. Our product management team is actually the team behind that alias They read every suggestion that they get. They will often, if they get some really cool stuff, call you and ask about it, and every feature that we make in the software is based on that. So any improvements we make, new features, all comes from that. Great question. Another question, how can we do a duct takeoff with the width and height? What you'll notice here in my markups list, I did not turn them on, but coming through to columns, you can turn on our width and height. In Review 2017, the width and height for all of your measurements is actually included. So if you're using Review 2017 and you were to come over across the bottom here, let me close this up so it's easier to see, you'll notice that all of your measurements that, we'll sort by subject, so like all of your measurements that are area measurements of any shape and form do have a width and height that is automatically assigned to them. The other thing that you can do, so let's say that you want to be doing, for example, using either a perimeter or a poly-length measurement to do your duct, and you want to assign your own width and height, you can actually create a custom column. So that custom column can be really easy. So I'm just going to say it's a number column, assigned width. Okay, format for this is just going to be normal. I'm going to add an assigned height. Once again, make that a number to make sure that the only thing a person puts in here is the number. So then let's say I've got let's say I've got my poly-length tool again, right? So I want to assign a width and a height for maybe the pipe here or for a duct or something like that. Down here in the preferences, or properties, sorry, not preferences, properties, I can now add in that number. So 2.5, 1.6, whatever those assigned widths and height are going to be, I can put those in there. And then notice as I click away, those are now here in the markups list for us. So we can assign those to the tool. And that way, as we go to come out and take this stuff out using the CSV summary, we can take those columns and that information out in that CSV summary. Great questions. I do not see any more questions at the moment. I will hang out just another minute. I know this is always a popular topic for people, and we tend to get quite a few questions from it. So hang out just another moment in case you're still typing. But for those of you who are done, you've got all your answers. Thank you all so much for coming. And thank you so much to Novedge for hosting us today. It's been just a pleasure to have you guys on the line and to be able to give you all of this great information through Novedge. Feel free to check out their website if you need the version 2017 or if you need version or the edition Review Extreme. Okay. Great. So if we have a takeoff and preset all the quantity links already, what is going to happen if we have a new set of drawings? Do we need to do new takeoffs with new quantity links? Great question again. I showed you earlier how we went ahead and imported, right? We took our revision 2, we came through, we imported our markups from our material takeoff, right? Or our measurements, right? So here was all of our measurements that we imported onto our new version. Maybe we updated them because of the changes to the design. Great. Now, if we needed to update our bid, all we would have to do is right-click, quantity link, and change our source file. So rather than having this as our source file, again, all we would do is we would remove the file that's there. We would add the new file. I don't have it saved here, but we'd add that new file. I'm just going to take this one, and it would automatically update all of the amounts.